In this video, we're going to discuss advanced switch configuration. Now, you've seen in our previous videos where we've discussed the initial switch configuration that we ended up with a good basic running configuration. However, like anything to do with networking or computers in general, that basic configuration doesn't serve all of our needs until it's fully customized. And we won't go into all of the various configuration options necessary to get the switch up and running, but we will touch on some of the advanced monitoring commands and advanced configuration commands that you might use on your Cisco switch. Now, we are connected to our 2960 lab switch that we've been working with throughout the course of the video here. And you'll notice that we're in enable mode, or privileged exec mode as it's actually technically known. So obviously some of the commands we've looked at before are under the show commands. And since we are in exec mode, in privileged exec mode I should say, we have many more commands available to us than we did in user exec mode. The one that most everyone will use first off is show run, to show the running configuration. And if you've just gone through the initial configuration video, then this configuration is exactly what that configuration wizard came up with. It's not been changed. I've not done anything in the background to make this work better or worse. It is what it is here. So if you're looking at a switch and you've verified the running configuration, then one of the other things you can do is do a show ver to show the version of the software that's running on the switch. In this case, it is C2960 LAN Lite version 12.2.50. It tells you how long the switch has been up. It's been up for just over a day, just over 24 hours. It tells you what the system image file is. In this case, it booted off the flash, and there's the image name that it booted off of. You then get further down in the version and it tells you that this is a 48 port switch with 64K of memory. It's got one VLAN interface. Because this is a layer 2 switch, we can have multiple virtual Ethernet interfaces or VLAN interfaces, but only one can be active at any given time. It tells us we have 48 fast Ethernet interfaces, 4 gigabit Ethernet interfaces. Gives us the MAC address, the serial numbers, and if this switch was a stackable switch like a 3750, it would actually tell us how many switches are in the stack, their model numbers, the software versions, and the software images for each of the switches in the stack. So now that we've shown you two of the basic show commands that you'll use on nearly every device you connect to, let's actually start configuring some of the settings on the switch. Now, a lot of these settings were configured using the initial setup wizard, but we're actually going to go change some of those commands, just so you can see what it's like to do some of the more advanced configuration options. We will also set a login banner to kind of warn off people from trying to hack into our super secure switch here with its super secure passwords. So the first thing we'll do is we'll enter configuration mode. In this case, we'll do configure. And we have several options we can configure, from network or terminal, or we can replace the running config, or so on and so forth. In this case, we're going to config from the terminal. We only have to enter the T because it's the only option for configuration that begins with a T. So now we're in configuration mode. So the first thing we'll do is we'll change out our telnet password. And if you'll recall from our initial configuration, we have the extremely secure telnet password of password. So let's go in and change that. Now you'll notice that these are the VTY lines. These are the virtual telnet lines. We have 0 through 4 and 5 through 15. And the reason they're broken out this way is that older iOS versions only supported 5 telnet connections at a time. Later versions support up to 16 simultaneous telnet connections. Why you'd need 16 people telnetted into a switch at any given time, I have no idea, but I suppose that the need was there, or else Cisco would not have put the option into the iOS. So the reason it's broken out like this, and it's broken out like this by the iOS, you'll notice that we are not going to enter 2 sections, it'll break it out for us. It's so that if you were to copy this configuration and paste it into another switch that did not support the extended VTY lines, then your first 5 would be set properly, and you would just get an error when you put in line VTY 515. It would come back and say, hey, that's not a valid VTY line. So let's go back down here to our configuration, and we will do line VTY 015. So we're going to configure the login and password for all 16 VTY lines. Now, in theory, you could configure a different password for each of the 16 VTY lines individually, but why would you want to do that? Because you don't really ever know which one you're going to connect to. So now we're configuring the line. If we hit question mark on here, we see we have all kinds of options for configuring these VTY lines. Now the one we're interested in down here is the password. We're going to set a password for all 16 VTY lines. We're going to enter the password command, and we're going to hit question mark just to see what options are available to us. Now by default, if we just enter a password, it's going to assume that this is an unencrypted password. You also have an option to use a hidden password or an encrypted password, and that's useful if you have an outside company or a lower level engineer or technician that you need to configure your switches. You need to have them take them out of the box and put the configuration on the switch before they're sent out to the field. But you may not necessarily want that third party or that lower level technician knowing all of your telnet and VTY and console line passwords. So you can specify that the passwords are encrypted, which we'll show you how to do that elsewhere in the course when we talk about securing the switch. And that way, as they paste this configuration into the switch, or as they TFTP it into the switch, they can't just look at the config and figure out what your passwords are. In this case, since I'm not nearly good enough to come up with an encrypted password that's actually anything logical, I'm just going to enter the password 1. Super secure there, and we'll exit this. And if we show the running config and go all the way to the bottom, you'll notice that now our VTY04 and VTY515 passwords have both been set to the same thing. Now the last item we're going to talk about in our advanced switch configuration is banners. Now there are several different banners that you can set on the Cisco switch, and we'll talk about all of them briefly here in just a moment. The one we're going to set is the login banner. This is the banner that is presented to incoming connections before any username or password prompts are asked for from the connecting user. So we go into config mode to do this. So do config T, and we'll type banner and hit question mark. And there are several different banners, as we mentioned. We can set just any type of banner we want here without specifying one of the types of banners, and by default it's going to set the message of the day banner. You have the exec banner, which is the banner you see after you log in once the user exec mode has started. You have the incoming banner, which is shown on your terminal lines before you're even prompted for usernames and passwords. So you could, in theory, set an incoming banner for telnet that basically says, we don't allow telnet, go away. And since there is no exec process enabled for that VTY line, it would just display that banner and then disconnect. In this case, we're going to set the login banner, and the login banner is what's shown, again, before any username or password prompts. We'll do banner, login, we hit question mark, and now we're going to enter our banner text. Now, it could be just a simple one-line banner text, hello world or whatever, but we're going to enter a multi-line banner. And when you do this, you have to come up with a delimiter, and that delimiter can't be anywhere in your banner text, so it's best to set it to like a hash sign. Or Control-C. I've seen some people use Control-C as the banner delimiter. In our case, I've got a cute little graphic, so I'm just going to use the hash mark here. And now it says enter text message end with the character £. Now, there's a little bit of an idiosyncrasy with that, which we'll talk about here in a second. So I've gone out to a website and I've gotten an ASCII art of the words lab switch, and that's what I'm going to put in for our login banner. So I'll copy that, go in here, and paste it there. And the way this banner works, if you were done with this and you think, oh, well, I'm done, I'm just going to enter the £key here, and you enter £, well, it doesn't exit the banner mode. Basically, the way this has to work, you have to have a character and then the delimiter. The delimiter cannot be the first character of any line. I consider it a bug. I'm sure Cisco probably considers it a feature. In this case, we do that, we're bumped back to the config mode. So I'll hit Control-Z, and I'll write the config, and then we'll exit. We hit return to get started, but where's our banner? We set a login banner. Well, you'll notice that we're not ever prompted for a password here on the console. And this leads to the other password we were going to set. We're going to enable password authentication for the console port. In this case, I will go ahead and go into enable mode. We'll go into config T. In this case, we're going to use line console 0, because that is the console line. So now if we type login, that enables login, and actually we'll hit question mark just so you can see what the help is for it. But you see login enables password checking, so we'll do login, and we could say local to say only want to use a local database, or if you have a AAA or a radius authentication server, you can use that here. In this case, we don't have that on our network, so we'll do login. It says login is disabled until a password is set, so we have to set a password before it will ask for a password. In this case, we'll do password and I'll do Cisco 1 as the password. So exit that, write the config. And now let's see if we get that login banner. So let's quit, press return. There's our lab switch banner. And the reason we get it now is because we have login enabled for this. Now we're being asked for our password. So we'll do Cisco 1, and now we're in user exec mode just as we expected. So now you know some of the basic configuration settings to enable login and password checking on the switch. You've hopefully gotten comfortable with going into and out of configuration mode and writing your config, and hopefully that'll be a habit that's ingrained upon you, is that you write your config frequently so that you don't run the risk of losing all of your hard work after a power failure. And that concludes our discussion of advanced configuration.